Hey, what's up, everybody? Guess what we're going to talk about today? That's right, we're going to talk about knives. So I've always considered myself a gun dude. Grew up shooting. Had a firearms instructor, police officer for a father. Essentially, every male in my family grew up shooting. And as I became an adult and started carrying, I realized that guns are not the solution to all the problems. The internet introduced me to the Shivworks Collective and this idea of gunfighting in the context of the dude can touch you. You know, like the world is not a setup for a bill drill. And decided to get some martial arts training. Found a great place where I got some mixed martial arts, kind of an amalgamation of catch wrestling, Japanese jiu-jitsu, and Kali. And lo and behold, I've become something, I wouldn't say I was a knife guy, because you guys are pretty weird. But I'm definitely more blade oriented than I've ever been in my life. So I wanted to kind of talk about the context of defensive knife use, and then some potential selections here. One of the big things, context, knives have actually a bunch of pluses over firearms, right? Firearms only work essentially in one direction, and that's the muzzle. Knives can work in that entangled fight and can basically be used in all directions. Obviously, they're way cheaper. They're way easier to obtain. They're easier to conceal. I don't care if I lose one, and we'll kind of talk about that here in a minute. That essentially, like, it's not a huge financial issue if I've got to dump a knife. And I don't know a whole lot of people that can take everyday instruments and make a gun, whereas with a little bit of fieldcraft knowledge, you can facilitate and essentially make a defensive blade if, say, you were in a really dire kind of escape and evasion type of situation and didn't have access to two tools. You could conceivably make one if you had the software of how to run the dang thing effectively, right? So for a defensive blade, we're really focusing on stuff kind of between the 2 and 4 inch blade mark, or blade length, and I really want as much of the handle to fill my hand as possible. I don't want a really small handled knife with a big blade. I'd rather go the other way where it's relatively diminutive blade with a full-size handle, ideally, right? And then we've got a bunch of compromises that come with that. So as far as the choices here, like all these knives are actually super cheap. These are definitely on the cheap end of the spectrum, with the exception being the Spyderco that we'll talk about here first. I don't like really expensive knives. Essentially, like, if I damage or lose it, it hurts my heart. We've talked quite a bit on this channel of how miserly I am. So again, I'm looking for stuff that has good value. So this is a K-Bar branded knife. This is a good example of a suboptimal knife, at least for me. I like the fact that you can essentially fit this down a row of Pals webbing, Molly webbing, but you can kind of see, like, the blade geometry is not awful. It has a really modest kind of choil, the part that's going to keep my hand from sliding forward on this blade if I hit something, and it's got a really small grip. Like, I'm really only getting 3 fingers, and I'm super not confident if I had to use this in a defensive way. It's not a horrible utility blade, but definitely not something that I would prefer to use in a self-defense encounter. On the totally other end of the spectrum, we've got the Spyderco. This was actually my dad's. He carried this one on duty. I love Spydercos. These are awesome. They're a little bit more expensive than what I would typically prefer to use. They're super light. I like the fact that they're stainless and plastic. So, like, if I'm going to clip a knife to my board shorts on the beach, I might get some surface rust on this after a day in the salt water, and I'm going to hit it with some hops and some steel wool, and it's going to go away. So these are great. I want to say this knife is quite a bit over $100. I prefer a Wave, and we'll talk about that here next. But these are great knives, but just a little bit too expensive for everyday use for me. A waved Spyderco, for me, is like kind of ideal, but we're talking about a $150 pocket knife right there. And I have this one. So this is a Emerson CQC style knife. This is Chinese, manufactured by Kershaw. So the wave, the idea being that like as you're carrying this in your pocket, you pull this out and this catches on your pocket, and as I'm drawing it, it will open up, right? So it really facilitates one-handed draw. I'm knocking this camera around. One-handed draw. And this is the most economical knife that I could find with that function, and also had a factory trainer, which I feel like is kind of non-negotiable, especially if you're talking about like folders. That geometry of the folder, how the pocket clip and and your actual clothing interacts. Using that under pressure is very unlike pulling a fixed blade out of your waistband. So if you're going to be serious about training with a defensive folder, I really recommend find some type of it's a unsharpened facsimile of this that you can pressure test against a non-consensual opponent. I like folders. I will be the first to admit that a fixed blade is actually more efficient for defensive use. A folding knife is essentially a broken knife. Fixed blades are way better for that. I don't have a job that would really make me require to have a fixed blade. Being out in the field is one thing, but I think personally, this is my opinion, and maybe it's a spicy take. I think if I were to have a defensive fixed blade on me, use that defensively, that's going to look awful. Cops are going to show up. I'm going to be covered in somebody else's blood. I'm going to very likely going to have to defend that against a jury of a bunch of people who have no idea about anything when it comes to defensive use. I think a folding knife looks a lot more common, and it's a lot more understandable that like, hey man, I pulled out my fixed blade and I defended myself. Yeah, I've got a martial arts background, but I wasn't looking for trouble, and that's the truth, right? Where I think it's a much harder sell with the fixed blade. Can you do it? Absolutely, right? And again, I do think a fixed blade is the right choice for a lot of people. I think women especially, or people that wear scrubs. I think a fixed blade and some pepper spray, some hot sauce solves a ton of problems. And I think arguably is a better solution to most problems than say a gun alone, right? But going back to selection here, fixed blade. This is a Pioneer Woman. This is essentially just kitchen cutlery, right? I found out about this brand through Ed Calderon and his Instagram and YouTube pages. Ed, if you don't know Ed, look up Ed's manifesto and prepare to have your mind blown as far as your perspective on defensive stuff. This is like a $9 knife you can get at Walmart. I just threw some athletic tape. You've seen me use that kind of stuff before. This is a really great knife. Like, this is a hand filling knife. It's sharp as heck. It's got it's the metal of the blade goes all the way into this. So this is a really stout knife. It's kind of heavy for everyday use. And you are going to have to build a sheath for it. I have not gotten to that point yet, and this is kind of just a project that I've been playing around with on and off for a little while. But I actually really like this knife. If somebody developed a defensive knife like this with a sheath for like $20, I don't think you could make them fast enough. Pretty dope. The other item, kind of related to Ed Calderon's mythos, is going to be this Victorinox. It's the same company that makes the Swiss Army knives. This is a fruit knife, and again, this is something you can get from Walmart, okay, for a few bucks. This is obviously something that is fabricated for usage with this in a more defensive way. Oops, reversible there. Again, this goes in your pocket. As you pull it out, this catches on your pocket, and you've got the only other kind of custom feature here is that this has been beveled, so what the blade orientation is without necessarily looking at it. I can tell which way this, I believe it's called a bird's beak, okay, style blade. This is definitely not a stabby modality. This is more of a slashy modality. Super light, super cheap. Again, if I'm finding myself in a security checkpoint and all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, I can't go in here with this, to trash this, and write it off as a loss, I can live with that. The Kershaw is like $30. I can live with that. I used to have like burner Spydercos specifically for that type of situation, and then like nicer knives, and ultimately like I've kind of landed on the Kershaw. Like, you can get For the price of that Spyderco, I can get you know, a couple of Kershaws and a trainer, and if I've got to get rid of one at some point, or it breaks or whatever, I haven't had one break on me yet, but it's not going to break my heart, right? So that's another option if you are into the fixed blade flavors. Now, I did say that I'm not huge on fixed blades. This is maybe the addendum to that, in that, like, I think these types of kind of punch tool, punch knife type things might be more defensible, in that these are designed, these K-Bar ones, TDI branded ones, are designed for uniform police officers to basically cut people off their guns, right? I think you could make an argument in court saying, like, hey, I bought this for the exact same reason cops use these, right? It's just a defensive tool. It's not really an offensive tool. This one's a big chunky boy, probably more suited for like a Molly system. It's got some weight to it. And these are pretty easy to use, right? Like, you're basically just throwing a punch, kind of like with your thumb going towards the target. Okay, and then you do have some slashing capability. I've carried these, and they work pretty well. You can draw this without lifting up your shirt. This is a sheath that I made. But basically, like, on the outside of my belt, with this pointed kind of like towards my pelvic crease, where my leg meets my hip. And then you have this what do you call it? Relatively small blade. Fills my hand. Okay, it fills my hand rather well. Easy to use. The downside is, like, this is essentially designed for people that don't know how to use knives very well. So it's really, really tough, if not downright impossible, to find a trainer for one of these. So tough to pressure test this. You might be able to find a Nox knife, which might be more useful. But anyway, so still not quite, you know, what I'm into. But again, like, your mileage may vary. That might be a very viable choice. And last but not least, we've talked about dumping knives due to security checkpoints. We also talked about knives that have a full hand, a full handful grip. This is obviously not that, but this is a 3D printed punch tool. You've seen me durability and penetration test this before. Not something that I've carried yet. But I've played around with this, and while it doesn't necessarily fill the hand because of the geometry of the grip, really secure. Obviously a very, very modest, very, very, it's a point-driven type of thing. I'm not slashing with this. Okay, I'm not slashing with this. This is not especially sharp. But again, if we think about like, this is for entanglement. This is for getting somebody off of my gun. Again, we can kind of think about, like, that person that's like, yeah, I'm not, you know, super comfortable carrying a gun. Maybe I want something a little bit more approachable, right? Like, this isn't going to require a lifestyle change necessarily. Obviously, more training is a good idea. But this is, again, super economical. I think it's like 15 bucks. Can put this probably just about anywhere. Would I say, oh, I'm not going to take my Kershaw because I've got this punch tool? No, I can do a bunch more stuff, a bunch of different, I just have more flexibility with this, but this might do the thing that I need a knife to do, right? Again, I'm gonna kind of dwell on this one. I think is one of the bigger size ones they have. You can get them in different styles. All of them have this wave function. They're a little heavy. They're a little like, especially compared to something like the Spyderco. And I grew up reading Richard Marcinko books, where he used the CQC quite a bit. So that makes my nerdly heart happy when I mess around with these a little bit. So I do really recommend these. You can get them on Amazon, like I said, 35 bucks. And probably the best value out there that I have found. Can't recommend these enough. So defensive blade use, defensive blade selection, the attributes that you're looking for. Most important thing is get some training. You know what I mean? I think people really overestimate their efficacy with knives, and what using a blade in an entangled fight would look like. I've never done it for real, right? I'll be the first one to say that. But I've gotten quite a bit of reps of working with it against somebody who doesn't want me to jam them with the training blade. And it does take some time. It does take some time to get good at it. I think I would put it higher up on the paradigm of preparedness, and not to go off on a tangent, and probably worth a whole nother video. But I would say getting good with a blade is probably more important than getting good with a knife in a lot of ways. and just to kind of explain that real quick, but like mindset, mental health, physical health, open hand, verbal judo or verbal de-escalation skills, knife work, pistol, and then rifle is kind of the way that I think about that in a lot of ways. So probably going to be a whole nother video, but just like I said, if you don't have a decent knife that can be pressed into use as a defensive tool, I would probably fix that before buying your next case of hollow points or that new AR-15 optic. Just saying. All right, guys, be good.